Hi, this is Mike Green, and this is our new acoustic guitar library, Acoustic Lite. That, of course, was the straight sustain articulation. We also include a palm mute articulation. Now, if I take this palm mute articulation, I can add a little bit of bass, maybe add an eighth note delay, and some more reverb, and I got a pretty cool sounding pizzicato kind of sound. We can do like a Bugs Bunny tiptoeing kind of thing. Now, the important thing about this is that we're not really trying to pretend to be pizzicato. We're just making an alternate sound that we would use in the same kind of applications. It's really about sounding original and not having to use the same instruments that we use over and over again. This just gives us another option. In fact, you could use this palm mute setting to do like a marimba kind of thing, to do like a Gautier kind of pattern like this. We'll come back to this, but for now, I'm going to save this setting. I'm going to call it pizzicato. We'll come back to this in a little bit, but right now I want to show you the other features that we have here. I want to put this back to the default settings. To do that, you just hold down Apple and then click on something. That always brings you back to the default. There, good as new. Now I'm going to play a pattern that you would more typically play with a palm mute. Okay, now that pattern would be a little easier to play if we set our keyboard layout switch to left-right. These blue keys at the bottom, which are normally the full range of the guitar, are now going to change to 3 octaves of blue keys, and then 3 octaves of green keys, which play the same notes. Different samples, of course. And it's even more handy if you play really repetitive stuff like this. While we're here, I'll mention another use for palm mutes, and that's when you're doing a rock song where you've got electric guitars chugging eighth notes. If you add the palm mute chugging those eighth notes along with it, usually in fifths or fourths, then it thickens the sound quite a bit without making it the obvious sound of doubling the guitar. It's pretty useful. Put that behind some electric guitars and I think you'll like the results. Now, back to the left-right keyboard layout. It's also useful for strumming. I'm going to switch the articulation back to sustain again, and then I'll play a little left-right strum pattern. Now, you'll notice that there's not a lot of bass in that chord. That's because my hands aren't big enough to span the 2 octaves that a guitar chord normally takes. So if you also want to hear these notes in your pattern, then you're going to need your sequencer to combine those or else draw them in manually. Either way, the left-right option makes it a lot easier to get a convincing strum pattern. Now, we also sampled chords to make the strumming even easier. Just go to the articulation menu, select chords, and you'll see 2 octaves of blue keys for the major chords and 2 octaves of green keys for the minor chords. With both the major and minor chords, the first octave is downstrokes and the second octave is upstrokes. Now, you're probably thinking, gosh, Mike, that sounds amazing, but what if I wanted to play a 7th chord? Well, here's a funny thing. It actually doesn't sound too bad if you take an extra track of sustain and then just play in the 7th notes, mix this down a little bit. Now, here's what it sounds like without this extra note. And here's what it sounds like with the extra note. Not bad. Now, let's try this with a major 7th. I'm just playing these extra notes on a second track and mixing them in. Anyway, back to the other features of Acoustic Lite. You may have noticed that there's a switch here that goes between 6-string and 12-string. I'm going to set the articulation back to sustain. That's 6-string, so now I'll set it to 12-string and add a little extra reverb.
Cause I'm haunted, dead or alive.
See? Now how many other companies give you singing in their walkthrough videos? Anyway, the 12-string also works in left-right mode. Now, it's not a real 12-string, of course. It's a 6-string where we combine the strings, either doubling them or putting them in octaves in the same way that a real 12-string would do. But I think it came out pretty convincing. The 12-string setting also works with the palm mute sounds. Here's with the 6-string. And here's the same pattern with the 12-string. It's kind of an inspiring sound. In fact, let's go back to that pizzicato sound that we saved a little while ago. Now, while we have that loaded, let's go to a new track and load in this other articulation that we haven't seen yet, the one called Spanish. Now, as you might guess, that's not really a Spanish guitar. It's actually a combination of the palm mute with the sustain and some EQing and the envelopes adjusted as well. We did all that internally for you, so all you have to do is just select Spanish and you're ready to go. We can try a little flamenco rhythm here. And then if we add a second track of Spanish guitar, add a little delay, a little bit of chorus, then we can add a little solo, something like this. I'm going to save this solo setting, call it Spanish Solo. And now I'm going to go back to that pizzicato setting that we had. Spanish Solo on a second track. And then we can do this. Now, why is this called Acoustic Lite, you might ask? Well, the acoustic part is obvious. The light part, though, is because for this guitar, we sampled what we needed to get a good sound, but we didn't add the expense of a million round robins and a whole bunch of velocities and a bunch of other stuff that we never use 90% of the time. We do have round robins on all articulations, mind you, just not a ton of them. And the velocities in this guitar are scripted rather than sampled. Check it out. By doing it this way, we're able to include all the features and varieties of tones that you've been hearing in this video without charging you a fortune for it. Plus, we can keep the RAM to a minimum. It's all about adding new and useful sounds to your palette that you can use quickly. You've heard what Acoustic Lite can do. You know you want it. So head on over to Realitone.com, pick up a copy for yourself.
So get that guitar called Acoustic Lite.